get started. This first session will be Build America, Buy America. And just to let you know, throughout the day, these cameras are going to be live streaming everything we say or do until about 4 or 5 o'clock this evening. So, speaker for this session will be my fearless leader, Jennifer McCleve. Whenever you're ready, Jennifer, we're ready for you.
Ready to rock?
Ready to rock.
All right. Since I'm the kickoff show, we want to check the feed, make sure everybody can hear and see. Any thumbs up from the remote audience? Justin, you checking with them?
Yeah. I'd like to say it a lot. I think it's okay.
Okay. Morning, everybody. Look who drew the short stick with the first session in the morning talking about Build America, Buy America, huh? That's me. And you know, I haven't worn a jacket in a few years thanks to COVID, but it's still buttons. Are you guys good with that? I did put on a little COVID weight. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Build America, Buy America this morning. I am not an expert. I am here to convey what information that we have at this point in time. Build America, Buy America, however, is a discussion that is ongoing from a national perspective. There's feedback being sought through USDOT, requests for comments nationally. AASHTO, the American Association of State Public Transportation Officials, is planning on providing a response to the most recent set of requests for comments. So this is an evolving subject matter. That said, I'm here today to give you a little bit of information about Build America, Buy America as it pertains to utilities. Here's the outline of how this is going to break down. This is the best way I could devise to run through the subject matter. Talk a little bit about history, an overview of Build America, Buy America, some of the terms that you'll find in the legislation, application to utility relocations, waivers is a big subject nationally, and Kentucky implementation as it stands today. All right, so first things first, let's talk a little bit about history. Build America, Buy America is way back from 23 USC 313 and CFR 635-410. Some legislation that's been in place for quite some time. Many years ago, it was tweaked in order to, I think in the Obama administration, to incorporate utilities in the original Buy America legislation. Build America, Buy America is new. It's part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, BIL, part of Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. I'm sure you all have heard that, that legislation. Don't want to go through this, just want to have it in the slide deck. So if you want to download it at a later date, this gives you a perspective on Buy America, Buy American from an agency perspective. The different federal agencies have authority to apply interpretations and waivers to Build America, Buy America. This is some language that talks about those different agencies and how they treat it. Of course, our transportation projects are under the Federal Highway Agency's overview. So Buy America. Buy America, it applies to steel, iron, and manufactured products originally. In 1983, there was rulemaking that came into place through Federal Highway Administration, and that rulemaking indicated that under federal funded projects that are under FHWA's purview, waiver is applied for manufactured products. Okay, so steel and iron applicable under FHWA funded projects. 94, there was a waiver for ferry boat parts. 95, a waiver for iron ore pig iron, pelletized iron ore due to a lack of adequate domestic supply. And in January 25th, 2021, President Biden related executive order. Executive Order 14005. Entitled Ensuring the Future is Made in All of America by All of America's Workers, and required the maximized use of goods and products and materials produced in the United States. Then in 2021, there was the BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was Build America, Buy America Act. So now we're transitioning over from just Buy America to Build America, Buy America via the executive order and the BABA. November 2021, BABA came into place, expands the coverage of the original Buy America legislation, effective May 14th of this year. It says that none of the funds made available for a federal financial assistance program for infrastructure may be obligated for a project unless all of the iron, steel, manufactured products, and construction materials used in the project are produced in the US. So we've added construction materials. April 18th, a memorandum came out of the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. It's titled M22-11. Initial implementation guidance on application of Buy America preference for federal assistance projects. That document is out there. It's readily available. I have a copy of it. If you all would like to receive that, I can certainly attach it to this presentation. July 28th of 2022, the USDOT had a request for information, request for comments on BABA as it pertains to construction materials. So they sent out a request for comments nationally on the impact that the incorporation of construction materials broadly into the Buy America Act, how that would impact our projects. That period has closed, I think August 18th. I think August 18th is when the request for comment period closed. We did seek out some feedback to relay. All right, so a little bit about Buy America. As we discussed, Buy America Act, Build America, Buy America, excuse me, calls for iron, steel, manufactured products, and construction materials to be America preference. Manufactured products pursuant to the 1983 legislation are exempted for FHWA funded projects. The BABA Act called, well, actually, it started the Executive Order 14005, founded the Made in America Office under the Office of Management and Budget. When the Made in America office has the authority under the bipartisan infrastructure law to include guidance to assist in applying BABA and issuing standards for defining what manufacturing processes are in the most recent cases for construction materials. And we'll go through the terminology in a moment. All right. In circumstance of BABA, these are some of the terms that you'll find. You'll find these, gathered them up from a series of documents. It's from the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's included in the specific BABA Act. You'll find some of the terminology, some of the language in the memorandum, the guidance memorandum M-22-11. There's several resources from which I derived these definitions, but I did want to kind of consolidate them into one location to help. Okay, project. Federal funds, projects that use federal funds. An activity related to construction, alteration, maintenance, or repair of infrastructure. Subawards such as utility relocations should conform to the terms and conditions of BABA. That leads us to the question, what's infrastructure? A broad spectrum of items is what the terminology is pursuant to BABA. At a minimum, some of the things that we typically identify as our infrastructure: structures, facilities, equipment for roads, highways, bridges, public transportation. Also includes water systems, drinking water, wastewater systems, electrical transmission facilities and systems, utilities, and broadband infrastructure. Pretty broad definition of infrastructure. Here's a question that the guidance memorandum posed. If you're questioning whether or not BABA applies to your project, this is some of the considerations. Your project includes infrastructure if the project's publicly owned, if it's privately operated on behalf of the public, or a place of public accommodation. All right, so what's compliant iron and steel? Compliant iron and steel would mean that all manufacturing processes occur in the United States. Manufactured products waived under FHWA 1983 waiver. The product was manufactured in the US and the cost of the components is greater than 55% of the total cost of all components of the manufactured product. So 55% made in America. Here's an interesting note, because when BABA came out, there was a lot of confusion about, well, what's the difference between a manufactured product versus a construction material? And the Made in America office was charged to define what that is. And it's not a formal definition at this point. This is proposed at this point. It is subject to change. As I said, this is evolving. But the Made in America office did come up with this tentative definition, point of clarification as to what a manufactured product is versus a construction material. So our interest lies in construction materials, manufactured products which have 2+ of our listed materials under construction materials combined together through a manufacturing process are manufactured products. At least one of the construction materials listed at the listed construction materials, which I'll show you in a moment, with an unlisted material through a manufacturing process is a manufactured product. So what's a construction material then, right? Here we go. Construction materials must occur, must be manufactured. The manufacturing process must occur in the United States. So non-ferrous metals, plastic polymer based, glass, lumber, drywall. Not included, cement and cementitious materials, aggregates, and so on. So what is all manufacturing processes that you see in construction materials definition? What's that mean? It means, according to the Made in America office, subject to change potentially, that the final manufacturing process and the immediately preceding manufacturing stage occurred in the US. All right, how's it apply to utilities? Well, we looked at some of those definitions earlier. We looked a little bit about the definition of a project and what infrastructure means. When you throw those two definitions together, and the fact that we have utility relocations readily as subawards to our transportation projects, and they are defined expressly as infrastructure, BABA applies. One item that you should note is that BABA applies specifically to items affixed to the project, permanently affixed. Items that are brought to the site and removed do not, BABA does not apply to them. Equipment used to construct but aren't permanently features of the project, those are not BABA's not applied to those. Furnishings, things that are mobile and are temporary, not integral or permanently affixed. All right, waivers. Waivers are fun. Waivers are very complex. They're not, and it is not an easy process to seek a waiver for Buy America, Build America, Buy America. These are the types of waivers that the Secretary of Transportation will entertain. Not the public interest, not produced in the US, and increases the cost of the overall project by more than 25%. Those are the three categories that are eligible for consideration. Agencies such as FHWA, they rejected grant waivers in whole or in part. The preference is that waivers are granted on a project level for specific products. There's an encouragement not to provide blanket waivers across the board, but in some cases it certainly could make sense. It isn't rejected outright. Overly broad waivers that undermine the market are discouraged. They want, the obvious desire from this legislation, and honestly, probably from all of us, is that we would like to maximize the use of American-made products here in the US with our federal dollars. It's a reasonable desire. The agencies that would be reviewing the waivers are required to seek input and approval in order to have those waivers granted with the Made in America office. It's encouraged that waivers are time limited, preferably no more than 2 years before reassessment. Targeted, applied to specific items, specific projects. Conditional, excuse me. Federal agencies are encouraged to issue waivers for specific conditions that support and encourage ultimately the implementation, the access of materials that would be compliant. Not going to go through all of this. Lots of words on that page, right? This is a list of the waiver request documentation requirements. There is a lot of documentation included in requesting waivers for Buy America, Build America, Buy America. All right, so we went through the 3 different types of waivers, real briefly. Public interest waiver, pretty obvious. I think you guys probably already have the gist of what a public interest waiver may be. But it's considered if the policy goals can't be achieved by complying. Examples of public interest waivers that are viable. If you want to go into the details on what those public interest waivers might include, I've given you some more language about it. Pretty obvious minor components, an adjustment period waiver. That's one that we actually have a current waiver in place due to implementing an adjustment period, which I'll talk about. De minimis, small grants, all makes sense. This is the transitional waiver, the adjustment period waiver that I mentioned just a moment ago. The US DOT issued a transitional waiver Build America, Buy America relative to construction materials. And that is going to expire 180 days after the implementation date, and that's in November is when it will expire. So we have until November 10th, 2022, this year, to be compliant with the construction materials element of Build America, Buy America. All right, so if we aren't dealing with a public interest waiver, another option is non-availability. Basically, if the item is not produced in the U.S. in sufficient quantity of sufficient quality, it's not reasonably available, then a non-availability waiver is something that could be considered for your project. You have to provide thorough market research to validate that you have, in fact, confirmed that it's not reasonably available. And you have to verify that you don't have alternate options in terms of that particular construction material. Waivers should document the activities and methods used to research and come to that conclusion. Timing of the research, and of course the conclusion. Unreasonable cost is the third option, 25% plus increase in the overall project contract. You have to document the increase by providing a comparison of that domestically produced to the foreign product costs and the overall project cost using domestic versus non. There is the possibility to apply a general waiver across multiple awards. It could be product specific, it could be non-product specific. For example, the FHWA 1983 rule that excluded manufactured products as a general waiver, that is an example of a general waiver that could be explored potentially with BABA. The agencies are charged to review those general waivers once every 5 years from the date of issuance. All right, Kentucky. I've given you some history on Buy America and how we transitioned to Build America, Buy America, and executive orders and legislation that's brought us to this point. And we've talked a little bit about some of the language, some of the guidance that we've received on the subject. And we've talked a little bit about the waiver process and the potentials for waivers to be sought. We're in the infancy in Kentucky of implementation. We're making steps every day. We're seeking some input from our utility company stakeholders, because this is quite impactful to them. So July 28th, we sent out this memo to our utility company partners, seeking their input on the legislation that went into place. We also sent them a spreadsheet to provide us a list of non-compliant products, well, not products, construction materials, and steel, iron, so that we could get a gauge on how impactful this is to their business process. As you all know, utility companies own and operate their own facilities, and we're impacting those facilities through the transportation project and no desire of their own to be part of that project. But they do have to live up to the legislation that's in place. So we are looking to identify any critical aspects that we may need to seek a waiver for, or otherwise address. Buy America, we had a mechanism in place for managing Buy America for utility relocations. At this point in time, we're continuing in that same course, and we're going to seek FHWA's guidance and confirmation that we're heading in the right direction. We have our state authorization letters. Those of you that are utility coordinators should be quite familiar. When we have a project that kicks off and we have funding established for it, we send out a letter to our utility company partners that may be potentially impacted by the project, telling them, announcing the project and a little information about the project, and seeking an initial meeting to plan out conflict identification and remedy. In the body of that letter, we do specify that Buy America, we have in the past specified that Buy America is a requirement of all utilities impacted by the project. And we've had this language in the body of that memo standard. We've incorporated additional language, which is in red on the screen, that discusses the Infrastructure and Jobs Act and BABA and its impact in terms of adding the construction materials component, expanding the application of Buy America. And finally, when utility companies enter into contracts with us, that same language, that same requirement is a clause specifically requiring the utility company to comply with Buy America, self-certify compliance, and they validate that through invoices, where at the bottom in highlight it provides a certification that they've been compliant with all materials secured and reimbursed under this invoice. FHWA's requirements, expectations are included here. Under BABA, the guidance memo indicates that all federal finance assistance infrastructure programs need to comply with BABA by that grow-in date of November. New awards will need to comply with BABA requirements. Renewals and amendments obligating additional funds are required to comply with BABA. Here is a rough idea of what the waiver process would look like. If KYTC submitted a waiver request or a utility company submitted a waiver request, they need to provide all that documentation on that one slide that I told you I wasn't going to read through because it was a lot. And FHWA would be the recipient of that request, perform a due diligence approval or rejection of that waiver concept, notify the Made in America office in advance that there will be a posting of that proposed waiver for public comment. The waiver process expressly requires a comment period, a national comment period. FHWA would need to consult with the Made in America office for the proposed waiver with particularly with broader applicability. And there would be a period of comments posted, request for comments posted, and a comment period. Once that closes, it would be submitted to the Made in America office for review, and ultimately the Made in America office would be the reviewer and approver or rejecter of a waiver request. That wraps it for me. I think I'm a little early, actually. That was 48 slides. I can't believe we got through that so quick. Do we have any questions? No questions. I've bored them to tears. Do you all have any questions for me about Build America, Buy America? Any comments?
I have a few questions.
Yes, please.
All right. So, you, in one of your last slides, you noted that in the invoices, that's how you guys were compliant with the certifying the Build America, Buy America. This implies that this is only for reimbursables. What if you are not reimbursable? Are you still?
The state authorization letter outlines that Build America, Buy America is a requirement for any utility relocation work in Kentucky.
Right, but the certification, like, how does the company certify that we have met the
Right.
requirements?
Our utility relocations, whether or not they're reimbursable or not, enter into an agreement. And I didn't put the agreements up on the screen, but the agreements include the same language.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter if there's reimbursement or not. Federal regulation requires that we enter into an agreement with the utility company, specify the terms and conditions. And this is part and parcel of that agreement, whether or not funds exchange.
I didn't, just showing that one slide made me.
I understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
I know. It's tough. It is tough to be in a position where we are telling you as a utility company owner that you have to comply.
Right.
Even if I'm not providing reimbursement for the cost. It's tough, but that's where I'm at.
That is still being driven from the fact that Kentucky has, or all utilities are eligible under some circumstances.
Yes, sir.
So it's a federalized project. So whether they receive money or not, they're,
Yes.
Yeah.
Even if the utility phase funding, the funding that we would be using for utility relocations is state, if any federal dollars applied to that project at any point in its process, from planning all the way to construction, that's a federalized project. Sir.
Pre-existing contract.
The question, just for the audience online, the question is, does BABA require apply to pre-existing contracts? Correct?
Yeah.
It applies to awards after the grow-in period.
Awards of what?
Awarded contracts after the grow-in period.
A
Whether or
contract
not,
for what?
I understand. I don't have an answer on if some awards after, or if it is construction funds are authorized, then after, then we're good to go. At this point, we're operating with the information that we have on hand, and it is broadly stated that awards post-November are required to be BABA compliant. And the question has been asked. We don't have a formal answer yet. A few weeks ago, there was a national webinar with FHWA on the subject of BABA, where there were a series of questions raised. And we are waiting on a response to that discussion. So as I said, this is an evolving thing. That's one component that we're trying to hammer out, what do we mean when we say awards? Yeah. So I don't know. And I hate to say that to you behind a podium. I'm supposed to know it all, but I don't. This is a subject that is definitely evolving, and stay tuned. As I know, I will let our partners know.
To go along with that, in that paragraph, it said when he was reauthorizing money or getting extra money. So got utility funded prior to November, whatever, and you ask for extra money to take care of utilities. Is that gonna mean everything prior to or from that date forward, it's gotta be?
For those of you on the call, John's pointing out, is that what it does? Look at that. Renewals and amendments obligating additional funds must include BABA. That's an excellent question. And I do not have an answer to that. That's something that's crossed my brain as well as I've been going through this subject matter is, well, if we've got a contract with the utility company and we hit that November date and we have to change order or somehow amend, does that retroactively make the whole thing required to be compliant? I can't imagine that it would for the entirety, but perhaps that amended work scope would need to be compliant. I don't know that we could retroactively require a contract that already was in place because we expressly say that new awards must comply. So I'm hoping that that means that the scope of that amendment would be what's tied to it. Sir.
Kentucky is still under the approach that the utility self-certifies compliance and that the cabinet nor its consultants are responsible to make sure they're in compliance.
We are going to seek validation when we need to.
Okay.
We trust our utility company partners to self-certify. Yeah. And we're going through a process now of working with our utility company partners to make sure that they don't have components that are suspect. And we're seeking feedback from them at this moment in time, because the expansion to construction materials and that listing of what constitutes a construction material, that expands the scope quite a bit. It certainly does. So and we've received comments back from utility companies that it's concerning to them, and there's going to be some level of effort for them to provide us a spreadsheet of non-compliant materials. Sir.
Are you hearing any, like PVC, any specific types of materials that there may be issues with getting enough materials?
We're having all kinds of supply issues right now. I hear the chuckles in the room. I'm not ready to give a formal answer as to what my utility company partners are experiencing in terms of BABA compliant materials. I haven't heard a ton in terms of PVC, non-compliant PVC. I'm sure there's probably somebody out there that's got non-compliant PVC issues. Our biggest issue most recently has been the inability to secure utility materials. We have 6-month waiting periods right now just to secure pipe, as I understand it, and that's hugely problematic. So throwing this into the mix is going to be a challenge. On top of a challenge, honestly. Sir.
That's a two-part question there, so let me ask my second question.
Sir.
Is there a certification process in place to certify those last 2 manufacturing steps? Is there anything like that even in existence at this point, or is that going to be an issue?
I'm in contact with, I'm involved with AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. And that gives me a wonderful opportunity to talk to other states about issues that we have in terms of utility coordination. I work with the technical subcommittee on utilities in the group. And we haven't heard a lot from our fellow state DOTs about a certification, step certification process for construction materials at this point. We're all just kind of taking it in, collecting information from our state partners. And we're going to likely provide comments in the near future. There's a request for comment on EV charging stations being excluded from Buy America compliance. That's currently on the table and seeking comments. So I think AASHTO is going to comment on that. And we're going to convene as an organization to find out what other states are doing. We do not in Kentucky. Any other questions?
If we so desire to submit a waiver, do we submit it through KYTC or do we go directly to FHWA?
I would recommend, and I think we've got, John, I don't know if you want to comment on this, but I would suggest that you send that to me so that I can get that ball rolling for us and give me an opportunity to take a look at it. Maybe I can try to field some of the potential obstacles, challenges we may have in advance so we can get it to roll through the process faster. As I said before, that process does include working with the Made America office. There's going to have to be a comment period, a request for comment period on National Front. So it does take some time. There hasn't been many that have gone through. Yeah.
Do you anticipate the November 22nd or 2022 getting elongated so companies and other DOTs can comply to this? It just seems very fast.
It does. It does to me too. I don't think that we're ready by any stretch of the imagination. I think we'd love to be ready, but I think that the sentiment is wonderful. I just don't know that the resources are there, especially given the crunch to even secure materials at this moment in time. It becomes quite problematic. I would be willing to entertain a request for a general applicability waiver.
Okay.
If I had justification to do so. Whether or not that would take place, I couldn't tell you. If we would run it, be able to support it from a KYTC standpoint. Needless to say, I don't know that FHWA would support it to send it on for Made in America office consideration. But that would be a general applicability waiver. Sir.
Two things. One is your general construction department gearing up to address this as equally as important to them.
It is equally as important to them. They are gearing up. I am not part of that work group, so I don't have details on it, but they are cognizant for sure.
Second thing, and can you speak to successful practices that you would want to see implemented in the coordination process so that the utility coordination process is not deemed as the holdup of a project when it's. What are some of the steps that you think we need to be implemented?
Obviously documentation. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that too much. At this point, I've been kind of just digesting this conceptually, but I do think that we need to document that these impacts do occur. By sending out the memo to our utility company partners, we are seeking to get some clarity on how impactful this will be when fully implemented. So we're trying to get in front of it right now. So we've got a gauge on, you know, I wouldn't want to change our business processes significantly if this really isn't a problem. So at this point, I'm seeking their input to determine that this is truly going to be a potential delay to projects on a consistent basis. But it's a great point for me to keep in the back of my mind and implement. Yes, sir. Any other questions?
Just a comment, I think I've heard you say this before, but I hadn't heard it today. This applies to any material that's used on a construction project, whether it's material that we're paying for or material that our company is buying and installing under a permit only.
Yes.
I think there's some misunderstanding among some. They think that this is only materials that the state is paying part or all the costs for.
We were talking a moment ago about eligibility, that it doesn't matter if they get reimbursed, that if their utility is eligible and the funding of the project at some point in the history of the project from beginning to end use federal dollars. Buy America, Build America, Buy America, just keeps getting stuck on Buy America. It's BABA now. BABA applies. So absolutely true. Your comments 100% valid. Sir?
One comment, under the old Buy America, the federal project was defined by the NEPA decision. So in some cases, you may have a project that has multiple build sections, multiple utilities, multiple grading, multiple divisions, multiple service contracts. So under the old Buy America applied to the whole project. This slide implementing ABA, maybe that we're now going to ABA by that next award and then going forward. If you've already completed 2 sections, and you're completing this 3rd section of construction, it doesn't make much sense to apply ABA to the projects that have already been final. So it may be reasonable to suggest that the words need to go forward, awards or changes.
Okay. Do you think that I need to address that formally with FHWA?
Well, I'm not sure we have an answer yet, but I'm just saying that's a reasonable expectation.
Okay.
But yeah, if you want to ask, we'll run it up to flagpole for sure.
I don't know if I want to ask. It's a tough one. Thank you, sir. Any other questions?
I have one more. I believe previously under Buy America, not BABA, that if the utility company was doing new type of betterment, then that was not considered having to comply with Buy America. Is that still the case?
That's still my expectation. Have I addressed that formally? No. But I would definitely fight that fight for you, because that would be over the top. Yeah. I would fight that fight.
Right.
All right, any other questions? I really appreciate your time today, everyone. Thank you very much. For those of you on the line, thank you. I hope that this has been informative. You have a good day.